Hi folks, it's Rich here again. Thank you for tuning in. Big thanks to everybody who's subscribed and watched my videos and pressed like and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. This is part two of the golf video. I mentioned that I'd spent over £100,000 on golf gear in the past about 12 years or so, which I have. I had 170 something sets of irons. What was it for drivers? About 180, I forget now. Putters, 153. And my 104th bag is on its way, which I've just ordered. And there are many other things. There's a spreadsheet. I'm a 15 handicapper, and I typically play at the Warwickshire, which is just outside Leamington Spa in Warwick. It's a 2-course setup, quite long courses. My strength in my game is probably my short game. In reality, irons are okay, terrible with the driver, putting's all right. But the reason really for this one today is to talk about shaft flex and the different kind of flexes. How does it matter? And really, this is kind of aimed at, I would say, someone who's they've had perhaps their first set of clubs and they're now looking for another set. They don't want to necessarily go and pay new because these things cost a fortune now. They're looking at the second-hand market, and it's trying to make sure that you've got a shaft flex that is kind of all right for you and how to tell the difference. So we're going to start with the driver because shaft flex on the driver is the most important of the lot. And there's the main reason for that. I'll just get my driver out just for fun. The main reason is obviously it's the longest club. They're typically 44 to 46 inches long. So the variable on the driver is much bigger than any other club. It's your longest swing. It's the club that goes the furthest. So if it goes far in the wrong direction, then you're really stuffed. So shaft flex on the driver is important. Now they're not all the same. So you've got lady flex. They're usually always graphite, by the way, in a driver, which I'm sure you know anyway. But you've got lady flex, you've got old man flex, or A flex as it's called, which are super floppy, and regular stiff, extra stiff. And the big ones really are the differences between regular and stiff, and also the different kinds of stiff. They're just not all the same. No point thinking I need a stiff shaft and going and finding a club with a stiff shaft in it, because one stiff shaft is not the same as another. Likewise, regular, I need a regular shaft because my swing speed is 80 miles an hour or less, or whatever it might be. Not all regulars are the same. So before you go into the second-hand market for perhaps your second set of clubs, you need to do a little bit of research just to get a feel for what's right for you. So for example, if I take the driver, as I mentioned, some of the variables that are really important on here, probably the biggest one, which tells you how stiff it really is the torque of the club. It will very rarely tell you on the shaft what the torque is. It's measured in degrees, and its biggest measure of what shaft torque is its ability for the head not to twist. So how stiff it really is. Now this shaft in this club, I'll get it right way around. Sorry, it's a Diamana shaft. It's a stiff shaft. The torque is 3.2 degrees. Now, if that were some other brands, particularly own brands like Ping who make their own shafts, 3.2 torque would be considered extra stiff in a different brand. There's another shaft made by Proforce called an Active Core, which is still around today. It's a bit of an older shaft, but they still make it. The stiff shaft in that one is 3.1. It might be 3 degrees of torque. So it's really quite stiff. This shaft is 63 grams in weight as well, which is not heavy, it's not light either, it's somewhere in the middle, and weight also has an effect on it. So shaft torque, really important. If you're thinking to yourself, you've got a swing speed that, perhaps you feel like you hit the ball quite hard or it goes fairly far, or you've had your swing speed measured and it's kind of, 90 plus club head speed, and you're thinking stiff shaft, and that's probably the thing to do. But if you were to get one of Ping's drivers with their own shaft in it, or TaylorMade with their own shaft in it, a stiff shaft can easily have a torque of over 4 degrees. Some of the older Pings in particular, 4.5 degrees, which is really floppy, totally different to what this is, for example. So you don't want, play on words here, you don't want your shaft to be too floppy. So check what the torque is. If you're not sure, just go online. You might have to do a little bit of Google and until you discover what the shaft torque is. But I would say that if you're after a stiff shaft, the torque really should be 4 degrees or less. If it's over 4, then you're really into the realms of a slightly wobblier shaft. It's not ideal at all. So have a look at shaft torque. That's number 1. Number 2, I mentioned briefly the weight of the shaft. Now, Miyazaki, some of those shafts, 39, 40 grams, really light. If you're someone who swings quite hard at the ball, or you feel like you hit the ball quite hard, you're going to struggle to control the driver head with a shaft that's that light. Likewise, if you go too far the other end, some of the shafts that are getting towards the 80 gram mark, that is really quite heavy. So shaft weight also has an effect on how stiff it's going to feel. I would suggest that my club head swing speed is 92 miles an hour. So, I do hit the ball really, and I don't have the prettiest swing in the world. I'm a bit of a baseball whacker, I suppose. So this is 63 gram shaft. I played with 69 before, so heavy-ish for me, low torque for me as well. Just allows me to have that baseball battish swing. So weight's important. If you're thinking I need stiff, there's a nice Miyazaki shaft in stiff that's 39 grams, and the torque on those is about 5. They're really, really floppy. That's not the way to go. Another thing to look at as well, and you can find this information out. Sometimes it'll have something to do with this it might tell you on the shaft, not often, but is the bend point or the kick point of the shaft. So that is effectively where the shaft is designed to have its most flex, and that has an effect on the flight of the ball. So if you have something that's got a high kick point, that insinuates that the shaft is at its flexiest point nearer to the grip. Mid, as it suggests, is in the middle, and low is down here by the club head. Now, if it's got a low kick point, then what's happening here at the bottom of the club is it's flicking the ball up more because it's bending at the bottom, so you'll get a higher height. A mid kick point will give you a mid sort of height flight, and a high kick point down here will give you a lower flight. So again, this is information you can find out for yourself. If you're like I say, if you're trying to buy something secondhand, so you're not paying bloody £400 for a driver these days, and you're not getting, haven't been custom fit, or maybe you've been to the driving range and you've been on a monitor, and you're like, right, okay, I sort of know what I want. What am I looking for? So kick point or bend point are important. High up here by the grip is a lower flight. Mid flight. Low kick point, that will give you a higher ball flight. It also ties in a little bit. You'll hear the term sometimes about tip stiffness. Is it tip stiff? Project X shafts quite commonly got what's known as a stiff tip, so there's not much sort of flick and help at the bottom of the swing in terms with the ball at impact. It also helps to keep the club head a bit straighter. So a tip stiff. This is tip stiff, which suits me because I sort of hit at the ball really. I've got quite a steep angle of attack and quite a high smash factor, so I hit quite hard. So tip stiff is good. But again, if you're someone who struggles perhaps to get the ball airborne, doesn't matter if you've got a decent swing speed, you might still struggle to get it airborne. That is one thing to look at as well. So you've got high, medium and low kick point and tip stiffness, and you can find all this info out. So the driver is the most important one in my opinion for getting the shaft flex right for you. I know Rick Shields did a video not that long ago where he took all sorts of drivers from very floppy to very stiff, and it just showed that whilst obviously he's a golf professional, so he's got a very reliable swing, but even so, the softer the shaft, the worse the results were. So you need to try and get it somewhere right about for you. So for me, I'm 5'8" tall, so I'm not that tall. This shaft is a mid kick point, fairly heavy, pretty low torque, quite stiff, tip stiff. So stronger player sort of hit it hard. So that's in driver. Now in irons, it's a slightly different scenario. It's not as important to get the shaft flex bang on. It still, don't get me wrong, if you're a female golfer, an older gentleman, or someone who doesn't hit the ball very hard, then sure, an extra stiff shaft is not going to be very helpful to you. I get that. But for people, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, someone like me, sort of an average hitter of the ball, shaft flex isn't as important as people think. They get really wound up by shaft flex. I can play with something like a Dynalite 105 regular shafted iron. I'm sure that will make the ball go higher for me, and I can feel that it's softer. So psychologically, I'm like, oh, I don't think that's quite what I want. But the results overall, they're not that different. You know, I'm a 15 handicapper. I hit some good shots and some bad shots. I'm not a robot. I'm not repeatedly hitting it well over and over again. So there's margin for error, whatever I do. So in irons, it's not quite as important. I think the things for me on this is blokes, unless you've really got a very slow swing speed or you've got an injury or something, there's no need to be using a graphite shaft. Just not at all. They're too floppy, too light. So you'll be looking at steel. Now, a dynamic gold, which is a very popular shaft, their S300 shaft, which is stiff, 130 grams in weight, it's a heavy shaft. Their regular shaft is 127 grams in weight. The torque difference between the two is not much in it. So those regulars and stiffs, they're not hugely different. The big thing really is the tip stiffness on those. So again, even with iron shafts, you have tip stiffness. If it's quite soft at the tip, it will help flick the ball up. If it's a firmer tip, that won't give you that much help. So Project X, for example, all of their shafts are tip stiff. So you've got to have a bit of extra club head speed really to try and help get yourself through the ball. Dynamic Gold, they're softer on the tip. Nippons, also softer on the tip and quite smooth. I like the KBS C-taper shaft here. This is an extra stiff shaft in 115 grams. Now, I've played with the 130 grams before, which are just quite hard work in the long irons. This is a 2 iron, and 130 grams, especially after about 10 holes and you're a bit tired, it's hard work. So I've got extra stiff here because I like I say, I steep angle of attack. I hit at the ball really, so it gives me confidence that I can hit that as hard as I like, and I'm not going to outswing the shaft, if you like. But I've purposely had the 115s this time instead of the 130s, just to make it slightly easier to swing. It's a little bit lighter. That also makes the club head feel lighter. Something called swing weight. The swing weight on this club, these are all D2, so the weight distribution is quite even. So this shaft kind of suits me, but I think the point I'm making for people when they're picking shaft is regular, stiff, extra stiff, and so on in irons. It's not quite as important as it is in the driver. It's a smaller club. One thing that of note there is, I reckon 8 times out of 10 people will get, oh right, I need in my irons, I need a regular shaft, it's a Dynamic Gold, or I need a Project X 6.0, which is almost extra stiff. It's like stiff, extra stiff in the irons. But then they'll get the wedges, and the wedges come standard nearly all the time with a wedge flex shaft, unless they get it custom fit. And wedge flex is usually either an S200 or an S300 Dynamic Gold shaft. So people get really wound up with, oh, I need such and such a shaft in my irons. Yet the wedges are just whatever they come with stock, which are totally different to the irons. And lengthwise between your wedges and your pitch and wedge 9/8 iron, the lengths aren't hugely different, so it's not making a massive difference in reality either. So, quick recap for you then. Driver, and this applies to your fairway woods to a reasonable degree as well. It's important to try and get the shaft as close to what you need as you can. Excuse me. Torque, have a look online. Anything 4 and below, really, if you're a hard hitter. Weight, you don't want it too light if you're a hard hitter as well, or you want it in 60 plus. If you think you're a regular player with a slower swing speed, then that's fine. The kick point makes a difference as well in terms of ball flight. So have a look at those 3 things if you're looking for a second-hand club. And with your irons, don't get wound up quite so much by it. Just avoid the extremities, I would say. You know, if there's something that's a regular Dynamic Gold or a regular Project X or a regular Nippon shaft, the difference between all those isn't going to be enough to get your knickers in a twist over it. If you see a set of irons you like the look of and it says Nippon regular and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm regular, or I like a Dynamic Gold regular or whatever, I wouldn't fuss that too much. I'd just buy them. It's not going to make a big enough difference. I think the only time that the shaft flex and in an iron, and it makes a big difference. Is, as like I say, from regular to extra stiff, or if you are someone who is regularly hitting the ball well and you know what you're doing, then maybe it's worth getting it fit exactly so you're getting the most out of it. I hope some of that makes some sense. Please like, subscribe if you want to, and post some comments. I say I've had an awful lot of clubs. I have been fitted twice before as well, so it's, and because I'm interested in golf, I kind of know a reasonable amount of stuff about things to do with shaft. So yeah, that's it for now. Rich, over and out. Thank you.